Okay. It's 7 o'clock Eastern Time. I guess I'm programmed to start going on live at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and I've got my piano this time because I'm not going to play too many songs as a performance, but today I'm going to just chat and kind of relax a little bit, chat about jazz and music, and especially concentrating on the Great American Songbook composers today. So the Great American Songbook composers composed roughly from the 1920s to the 1960s. And we're going to just talk about my favorite top 10 American popular music or Great American Songbook composers. And you can agree or disagree with me if you want. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm just running a little late getting on to it. There's always something. But, hey, you hear that every time I go on the air. So, okay. I don't know if I'm getting a connection through. Well, I'm going to check to see if I have it in the right spot here. Just a minute. Not getting any throughput here. Okay. I'm going to try one more thing. Anyway, the top 10 greatest American songbook composers, starting with Irving Berlin and going to Henry Mancini. We're going to be covering mainly that range. And I'm just going to try one more chord to see if I can get my direct piano connection hooked up here. Just a minute. All right. Well, I have no idea. But you will be able to hear the piano a little bit in the background just because it's being picked up by this mic here. So yeah, you can hear it a little bit, but not very well. Not as well as the other way, but okay. So this is all pertaining to I'm working on a little educational course on music theory, and I'm focusing it toward music theory for singers. Because sometimes singers are not necessarily instrumentalists. If you're an instrumentalist, say you study piano or guitar, or even a horn or some other instrument, you're more likely to learn the structure of music and the theory of music along the way. But if you're a singer, and there are many who are natural singers, they're able to sing, perform, and have enough knowledge of the music in their innate ability to perform without necessarily knowing a lot of music theory. So my concept is that if such singers or instrumentalists were to learn a little bit of music theory, music structure, I'm thinking they'll become better performers. They will enjoy music more. They will have more. They'll have more of their head in the game. They'll be more engaged. They will have a hobby or a career that's longer lasting. So anyway, that's the general idea. So in the past couple of live videos, I'm experimenting with presenting the elements of this course kind of off the top of my head. And I've been experimenting, but I might as well experiment live because that keeps my wits sharp, keeps my concentration elevated a little bit. So let me see, where are we? I'm going to turn my chat window on. I don't know if anybody's chatting or not. And it's often very difficult for me to tell if there's anybody watching. So anyway, for both of you viewers who are watching this, I'm going to just go over my top 10 American songwriters through the years. And I also have a new little transformer that elevates the sound of my voice a little bit. And hope it's not too loud. And all this experimentation that I'm doing at your expense, sorry, is going to pay off when this course comes out, and I'll have a series of I'm thinking about 8 weeks of lessons. Here my outline is generally to go through the basics of, it's going to be basic stuff. So some of you who are watching, some of my musician friends, you're definitely going to know most of the stuff. But I have a lot of non-musician friends who are interested in music, yet maybe they didn't study music in depth in school. But as I mentioned in my last session, when I was in 7th grade, our music teacher came once a week, and everybody in the class, musicians or non-musicians alike, learned intervals, scales, key signatures, music appreciation. We learned to recognize classical pieces. So it was very different in those days. I don't think that's done as much anymore in grade schools. So the composers that I just absolutely love are in the top 10. I'm going to start in no particular order, although Irving Berlin, the first composer I'm going to talk about, is my favorite composer. And hold on. There we go. Irving Berlin, of course, wrote God Bless America, and he wrote Easter Parade. He wrote White Christmas, and he wrote many, many other songs. And one of my favorite songs of his is from Annie, Get Your Gun. They say that falling in love is wonderful. It's wonderful, so they say. To hold a girl in your arms is wonderful, wonderful. Da, 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 so they say. And that's from the musical Annie, Get Your Gun. Irving Berlin. He started writing music after he emigrated from Russia on the streets of New York in 1911. He was a street singer, and that evolved into being a songwriter. One of his first hits was called Alexander's Ragtime Band. And here, Alexander's Ragtime Band. And then he went on to write for movies, some of the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rodgers movies. Of course, he wrote all the music in the movie White Christmas, which is one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion. The best things happen when you're dancing. when you hold a girl in your arms that you've never held before. It's Irving Berlin. He also wrote, Sisters, sisters, never were there such devoted sisters. So Irving Berlin is on my list of he's at the top of my list, but I don't like to, you're not supposed to have a favorite, child or a grandchild, but Irving Berlin is my favorite American composer among a collection of unbelievably great composers. So Irving Berlin, he's also the oldest. He's called the father of American popular music sometimes. Then I'm kind of going roughly in chronological order. Jerome Kern. Jerome Kern wrote musicals back in the early days of American musical theater. So Jerome Kern wrote the music to Showboat. That Old Man River, it's Old Man River. Da, 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 da. Old Man River is part of the musical Showboat, and he also wrote some of an old popular song in 1920 called "Look for the Silver Lining." Although a cloud appears in the blue, you know that somewhere the sun is shining. So the right thing to do is make it shine for you. It's supposed to be a happy, upbeat song, but to me it's almost a little bit sad for some reason. That was Jerome Kern, one of his early songs. Then he wrote some kind of nice involved songs, harmonically more involved, that the jazz musicians picked up on, like Yesterdays. Yesterdays, Jerome Kern. And he also wrote I'm Old Fashioned, which is just one of the finest songs ever written. I'm old fashioned, I love the moonlight, I love the old fashioned things, the sound of rain upon the window pane, the starry song that April sings. This year's fancies are passing fancies, but sighing sighs, holding hands, these my heart understands. And like we talked about yesterday, it's interesting to me how these songwriters start a song in a key, and then they modulate to a completely different key in the B section. So, and then they get back to the original key in a very ingenious way. Anyway, he was a genius songwriter for sure, Jerome Kern. He also wrote the one that is a favorite of a lot of younger people, and I get this request at weddings. Someday, when I'm awfully low and the world is cold, feel glow just thinking of you, just the way you look tonight. That's Jerome Kern. And he also wrote Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which I used to play quite a bit when the bars were smokier. But you can, if any of these songs are capturing your fancy, be sure to do further exploration on YouTube. You'll find a treasure trove of great music. So number 3 on my list of the top 10 great American songbook composers. And I'm sure I'm leaving out 90 great composers by only including 10 on the list. But Richard Whiting, he was one of the early composers. He wrote On the Good Ship, Lollipop, da 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 da. And he wrote some other standards like Till We Meet Again. I used to do that at sing-alongs. I can't remember how it starts, but if you heard it, it's just a very nostalgic, old-timey sing-along song. Breezing Along with the Breeze. Some of the jazz musicians will do that one. And he wrote the Hollywood theme song. Hooray for Hollywood. I don't really know the song, but you recognize the first few notes. Hollywood. Richard Whiting, number 3 on my list of the top 10 American songwriters in the tradition of the Great American Songbook. And 4 leads us right to George Gershwin. And George Gershwin was my dad's favorite. My dad would play all the Gershwin songs when I was growing up. And of course, George Gershwin wrote, there's somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that she, to one who'll watch over me. Someone to watch over me, and it's very clear our love is here to stay. He also wrote, it's wonderful and it's marvelous that you should care for me. And most famous of all, if you've ever seen the United Airlines commercials, he wrote the famous Rhapsody in Blue, which is considered a classical composition. Rhapsody, actually, the main theme of Rhapsody in Blue, you might recognize this. George Gershwin, one of the greats. He could you could almost consider him the greatest American composer. He was also a fabulous pianist, the tradition goes, and you can hear some of his piano rolls that he recorded. He also died at an unbelievably early age. He had a brain aneurysm at the age of 39, and after leaving behind a tremendous repertoire of songs that he wrote, he passed away fairly early. He was born Jacob Gershwin in New York, and he wrote some fascinating. You can go on and on with the Gershwin songs. I've got a crush on you, sweetie pie. All the day and night. Oh, his most famous song, by the way, is Embrace Me, My Sweet Embraceable You. Embrace me, my irreplaceable you. Bring out the gypsy in me. And his lyricist was his brother, Ira Gershwin. He didn't write any lyrics that I know of. I'm sure he wrote some, but whether they're publicized or not, we don't know. But by far and away, his brother Ira wrote all the lyrics for his songs, except a few in the early days. That's number 4, George Gershwin, one of the great American songwriting composers. And we're going to move on to number 10. Let's see. Oh, we got Barbie, who's watching. I wonder if we've got a few people watching right now. I don't really know. It's really hard for me to tell. I'm here at the Song of the Morning Ranch Yoga Retreat in the community office where they have internet, because the internet in my house is not adequate for streaming such things as this. So I'm here in the office, and I've got a beautiful little view out a couple of the windows, but of course it's a beautiful night in northern Michigan. It's been in the 70s today. It was a 75 in the middle of this afternoon, I looked at the thermometer, and it couldn't be nicer. A little bit cloudy, if you want to complain about something. Yeah, the clouds. What's with these clouds? It's not too bad, though. Don't tell anybody. Okay, and these are the songwriters I've played and learned. Jazz musicians use some of these songs to improvise. They use the form of the song. Some of the great American Songbook songwriters would write melodies only, and they would have a lyricist as a partner. And that was true, of course, of George Gershwin and Richard White, all the ones we've mentioned so far, except Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin wrote all his own lyrics. So that's another amazing thing about Irving Berlin. Harold Arlen is number 5 on my list, and he wrote a song that you might have heard of. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Harold Arlen wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It might be one of the most well-known songs in the Great American Songbook collection of traditional American popular music. Of course, along the same lines, he wrote Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and he also wrote If I Only Had a Brain. He wrote melody only. He had lyricists work with him, and he also wrote I'm gonna love you like nobody's loved you, come rain or come shine. High as a mountain, deep as a river, come rain or come shine. Another song he wrote was Let's Fall in Love. Why shouldn't we fall in love? Harold Arlen. And the song he may be one of his greatest songs is Stormy Weather. I remember my dad played this a lot when I was growing up, so it's Stormy Weather. Stormy Weather. See if I can remember the words. Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. I can't get my poor self together. It's raining all the time. And the title of his biography, in fact, is called Stormy Weather. Harold Arlen. Thank you for Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Mr. Harold Arlen. Number 6 is another candidate for the greatest of all American songbook composers, and that's Richard Rodgers. This guy wrote a quantity of great songs. He wrote the music, and his early partner, Lorenz Hart, wrote the lyrics. And they wrote you probably heard this song. My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart. Richard Rodgers, Rodgers and Hart. He wrote musicals such as Oklahoma. So obviously he wrote the song. Oklahoma, where the wind keeps singing down the plain, where the waving wheat. He didn't write the words though. Oklahoma, da da da. And he wrote, you've probably heard this one, Richard Rodgers. Can you name that song? Blue moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. Richard Rodgers, yeah. And he also wrote, later in his life, he wrote this one. See if you can name this song. animals are alive with the sound of music. So consequently, he wrote other songs from that same musical, like "Doe, a deer, a female deer, Ray, a drop of golden sun." The great Richard Rodgers, and of course his later musicals were written with another song partner, Oscar Hammerstein. They started with Oklahoma and did The King and I, South Pacific. This nearly was mine. The great Richard Rodgers. Number 6 on my list, but won't fault you if you consider him the greatest of all. And another candidate for the greatest of all, and boy, it's a lot of competition, but Cole Porter started coming on the scene in the late 20s, and in the early 30s, he wrote a song for a Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movie, and I will do a little bit of the verse. I hope you can hear enough of the piano. Oh, Susie and Richie in Woodstock, Illinois are listening, and Barbie Brown. So where was I? I was on Cole Porter. He wrote this song, and see if you can name this song. Like the beat, beat, beat of a tom-tom when the summer showers through. The tick, tick, tock of a stately clock as it stands against the wall. Like the drip, drip, drop of the raindrops when a summer showers through. So a voice within me starts repeating, you, you, you. Night and day, you are the one. Only you beneath the moon, under the sun. And that could be considered, I think it's the biggest selling, most downloaded song of the great American Songbook repertoire, Night and Day, and the biggest moneymaker, according to ASCAP, or one of those songwriting publishing auxiliaries that collects the funds. They say Night and Day is the biggest moneymaker, or it used to be, of the older generation of songs. He also wrote just any number of songs. In the still of the night, as I sit by my window, at the moon in its flight, my thoughts all come to you. And Cole Porter, like Irving Berlin, wrote all his own lyrics. Amazing. He wrote, tearing off a game of golf, I may have played for the caddy, but if I do, I won't follow through, 'cause my heart belongs to Daddy. That was one of his songs. He also wrote the great musical Kiss Me Kate, which had any number of great songs in it. It's called So in Love. One of the most haunting melodies you can imagine. It just creates atmosphere, just playing a melody like that. And the lyrics are just unbelievable too. So Cole Porter, number 7. All right, how are we doing on time here? I guess we've got time to go for 8, 9, and 10 of the top 10 great American songbook composers of all time, in my opinion. I'm able to do a broadcast, and I own the equipment, so I can pick the songs. That's kind of nice. Yeah. And I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot of songwriters too. Here's this songwriter, next songwriter. I kind of picked at random, but I looked at some of the great songs he wrote. Sammy Fain. He was a 9-time Academy Award nominated songwriter. He wrote, love is a many splendored thing. The April rose, it only grows in the early spring. Once on a wild and windy trail. Love is a many splendored thing. One of the top hits of the 1950s. Sammy Fain. He was born Samuel Feinberg. Changed his name. It's interesting that so many of these songwriters, I'm thinking all of them on the list. Could that be? No. They're all Jewish except for Cole Porter. Cole Porter is the only one on the list who's not Jewish. Oh, and Henry, and we've got one coming up, number 10 is not. So 8 out of the 10 are Jewish. There is a interesting story I have about that. For a while, we were renting out the Jewish temple in Sedona, Arizona, to do concerts. And we asked them what kind of concerts would they like to have, and we gave them some options. And we said, how about the great American Songbook composers? And they go, yeah, we like that one because they're all Jewish. And it's true, the high percentage of the songwriters were Jewish, especially in the 30s and 40s. And the Great American Songbook concept is really, we didn't call them Great American Songbook songs when I was starting off and playing gigs. Excuse me. We called them standards. They were just the standard songs. I was playing songs for the World War II crowd when I was a young teenager. And all those World War II songs like Gonna Take a Sentimental Journey, Gonna Set My Heart at Ease. Da, 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 da. So those were from that era. And it's funny how Sentimental Journey did last for a little while, but some of these songs are still absolutely artistically viable when you play them today. Number 9 on my list was very prolific, Jimmy Van Heusen. He was born Edward Chester Babcock, and he wrote a slew of songs. He was a pal of Frank Sinatra. They palled around and did a whole bunch of crazy things together, from, if you want to read the biographies. But he also wrote great songs like Come Fly With Me, Let's Fly Away. If you could use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. And he also wrote, let's see, On That Dream. Just beautiful, rich harmonies, changes. He wrote one song that I learned recently that was one of his early songs is Oh, You Crazy Moon. When they met, the way they smiled, I knew that I was through. Oh, you crazy moon, what did you do? When they kissed, they tried to say that it was just in fun. Oh, you crazy moon, look what you've done. It's got a nice bridge to it. Used to say to me, you know that I'm the only one. Oh no, you used to say to me, you know that it would never end. You should be ashamed to show your funny. You should be ashamed to show your funny face, my friend. There they are, they fell in love. I bet you think you're smart. Oh, you crazy moon, you broke my heart. Jimmy Van Heusen also wrote, Hide your heart from sight, lock your dreams at night. It could happen to you. Don't count stars or you might stumble. Someone drops a sigh, down you stumble. Jimmy Van Heusen. you can almost pick any one of his songs, and they're just great songs. He wrote a lot for Frank Sinatra, like, when somebody loves you, it's no good unless he loves you all the way. Happy to be near you. Jimmy Van Heusen. Number 9 on my list. Number 10 is the most recent songwriter. He already passed away, and he wrote music for films especially. And his most famous song is From Breakfast at Tiffany's. Moon River, wider than a mile. I'm crossing you in style someday. We're after the same rainbow's end, waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, Moon River and me. Henry Mancini, he also wrote, can you name this song in 4 notes? 4 notes. Okay, here it is. Pink Panther, of course. And the movie Charade is a beautiful melody that he wrote. It's in 3/4. When I was a kind of a young kid, about 11 years old, I think, my dad took me to a high school band concert in Dundee, Illinois. And during the band concert, they had a little rock band. Of course, this is in 1960. This is when, high school rock bands were kind of just starting. And one of the songs they played was a really compelling bass line, great bass line by Henry Mancini. No, it's a Peter Gunn. It's a Peter Gunn theme, I believe, a TV show. So maybe 30 years, 20 years, 25 or 30 years later, I was in the streets of Chicago, and there was a high school band playing a collection of, kind of rock tunes, and they actually had that song as part of their repertoire too. So that's a lasting song. It's just a fun song to play. If I knew how to play it. Sorry, I'm fumbling around. So Henry Mancini on my list at number 10 of the great top 10 American Songbook song composers. And you can agree or disagree with me, or you can, I'm no doubt I left many out, so you can find others I left out. One interesting sideline is I wondered if Antonio Carlos Jobim would be considered as part of the Great American Songbook, even though he's Brazilian, because his songs were such a huge hit, and it made his career having these popular songs in the United States when he was coming into prominence in the early 60s with The Girl from Ipanema. And when musicians are playing gigs, and maybe they're playing 99% songs from the Great American Songbook, they'll almost always include songs, by Antonio Carlos Jobim, the Brazilian composer. So is that considered part of the Great American Songbook? I think we'll adopt him as a Brazilian composer into the Great American Songbook collection. So thank you for watching. Sorry for all the technical problems, but that's why I'm doing this. I'm going to be coming out with the course Music Theory for singers, and it's going to have, I may have a section on songwriters and songs, but mostly we're going over the structure of songs and the basic theory of music, because everybody is a singer, right? Everybody, if you're not a singer, you want to be a singer. And if you're singing and having fun doing it, why not learn something about it and have fun learning some of the structure of music and the theory of music? It'll be more satisfying and more fun, and more, the world will be a better place, hopefully. So thank you again, and I'm going to say goodnight. And there won't be any virtual piano bar this Wednesday, which is tomorrow. I'm going to be starting up again another week, in a week or two. I don't know the date yet. It depends on a couple of things. I may be getting a semi-permanent location. We'll see how that works out. And I'll be coming on from time to time with these little chats. And if you have any requests for some topics you want me to cover, just let me know. Thank you. Bye.